Welcome everyone to the Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are here to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 7, Episode 4. It's called Gambit Part 1. So spoilers for the episode, and I must confess, I completely forgot this was going to be a two-parter. So when it was getting towards the end of the episode, I'm like, I think there can't be much left of this episode.
I get that. I did notice it said Part 1 as I put the episode on. So.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which isn't a complaint. It's just that it caught me by surprise at the end. I thought we were building to a resolution, and instead it built to a cliffhanger.
I would say that's inherently good pacing on its part, that you didn't notice that it was a Part 1 until the very end.
Yeah. That's probably a fair point. So when we read the IMDb synopsis for this last time, it sounded a bit wild. It was, Picard is presumed dead, but he's actually with some pirates or something.
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting to get this. I did kind of appreciate that the episode started with he's already missing, and we get this kind of, like, I feel like most episodes don't start with such a big scene. And when I say a big scene, I mean there's a lot to talk about in this scene, because it opens with a lot of the crew at this bar on some, planet or space station.
They're not in uniform. They're in like civvies.
Yeah, I mean, the start of it is Troy talking to the bartender, and she's actively kind of like putting on the flirting charm to like get him to talk, because he says something like, "Oh, maybe we could speak more privately," and she's like, "Yeah, maybe we could," and she says, "Oh, Brent." I'm like, "Okay, what's happening? What's going on?" And then, of course, then we get to Worf and Riker, and they're talking to some alien dude. They're trying to figure out.
Worf's like, yeah, your sister got, knocked up by some dude.
Got impregnated. And then when Crusher shows up, they say she's the sister. And they're like, okay, they're looking for someone. And then you eventually realize that they're looking for Picard when this alien describes someone being killed, and describes Picard, someone who is bald, someone who's a bit yay high, and so on and so on. And so, okay, so I think I like that the episode started us off and like, okay, what's going on here? And then by the end, it gives us like a more outrageous outcome to it, where like, okay, now we understand what they were doing, but the outcome and the answer to it is actually more wild than any of the setup for it was. So I think it was a really well constructed opening scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the best opening scene that this show's had in a while, I think, because it really was a lot going on.
It felt like I had something to say. It felt like I had a lot to set up. It wasn't just, and there's nothing wrong with just like an open that's a bit quieter and a bit more of a, oh, let's introduce one or two character beats that are going to be a big deal for the episode. But this was a bit more, no, we're really going to take the audience on a little ride to get to the point in what this episode actually is.
The fact that it opens on a mystery, like a real mystery for the first, minute or so, because you have no idea what's going on, is inherently more interesting than most episodes, just by its nature, because you want to know what's going on, right?
Yeah, and the characters are clearly acting out of character. They're putting on an act for this like sort of seedy dive bar that they're in. They're acting tough or sexy or whatever. So it's all very interesting. And then it sets up, okay, Picard's dead, and they genuinely think he's dead. Like, but hell, even the scene we get right after the opening titles, which is Troy trying to tell Riker that he needs to be at the memorial to say something because he's the captain now, or he's the acting captain at least, and he yells at her and says, "No, I'm not going there. I'm going to go and get these bastards. I'm going to find out what happened to him and kill them." Like he's on the warpath, and I like that Riker is pretty hypocritical in this episode, but it is acknowledged and it's pointed out, and he doesn't really make any excuses for it. He's just like, "I don't care. I want revenge." Like I don't.
No, it's a genuine character flaw, right?
Yeah.
It's not a good part of his character, but it makes him feel real. Not that Riker didn't already, obviously.
Yeah. We're 7 seasons in, so we've developed him a bit at this point. But
yeah, but it just feels natural that of course he's not a perfect person. He has anger issues, and he doesn't deal with grief very well. Clearly.
Yeah, that scene with Troy was quite good. Her saying, "No, you need to be there from like screw whatever your selfish need for vengeance is. You need to be there to inspire the rest of the crew. They're all feeling down. They're all feeling lost and hopeless because the captain just got killed, and not even got killed in like combat. He was on vacation and went missing, and then he's just turned up to be dead.
Yeah,
like they're all freaking out."
When Riker's doing his whole, I've got an open wound and I don't want it to be healed thing, I thought that was some of Frakes' best work in the whole show. Honestly, I think it's up there.
So And when I was getting to the whole idea of him being hypocritical, there's no conversation that's more directly tackling that. That when Riker's like, I'm going down to this planet because we've got a lead and we're going to investigate what happened to, like these artifacts. This group of pirates have been stealing stuff. We've got this witness after some, intimidation. I won't call it interrogation per se, but he does get quite threatening with like, hey, the Klingons have got a warrant out for your arrest, and the Klingons don't play very nice with the people they want to arrest, so hey, maybe you do what I say and you wouldn't, be in as much deep shit.
Maybe I can get it down from 20 years to 5. And the guy's like, well, maybe let's get no time. And Riker's like, well, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, maybe. But he's very aggressive, he's really going for it. And he's like, no, we're going down to that planet, I'm going to lead the away team. And Data immediately, and I love this, is like, no, you're acting captain, which means you should not be going down because you're too important to go on the away mission in case something happens to you. And all the way back, Counter at Farpoint, episode 1, what did Riker say to Picard repeatedly in season 1? No, sir, you can't go on the mission. I go on the dangerous missions as the first officer. You stay here because you're too important. You have to be here to make the calls. And Riker just was like, not today, Data. Not today.
Riker's like, I get it. I know what you're saying. I've said the same speech, but screw you.
I don't care. I'm going down there. So, hell...
Also, the little shitbag that he's interrogating, love him.
Oh, yeah, he's wanting a better quarters. He's wanting fine dining. He's milking
he
this.
He starts with 5 bars of gold pressed latinum. That'll do. And there's like, there may be more danger. Maybe need more. Maybe safe passage. Maybe better quarters.
Now,
maybe immunity.
I have no doubt the phrase gold pressed latinum was around before Deep Space Nine, but I feel like along with just casually mentioning Deep Space 4 and Deep Space 5, that gold pressed latinum has become a much bigger thing in the lexicon of the writers because of Deep Space Nine. I
understand its value as a, like, when they say 5 bars, I kind of have a vague idea of, oh, that's worth, not a quantifiable amount, but I get it, it's scale, right? As opposed to before where it would have just been whatever.
Yeah. Basically, Quark is trained as well on Deep Space Nine. But I'm sure it came up before, but like as soon as they said it here, I'm like, oh, they're just casually throwing this out now because they feel comfortable with it now.
Honestly, I don't know if it did come up before or if it's just, they've had a season of Deep Space Nine that's thoroughly established as a currency. And we might as well use that now.
Yeah, it just kind of feels like there's these little influences that Deep Space Nine's bled back into TNG. Nothing major, just little world building things.
Just enough that makes it feel cohesive.
Yeah. So they go down, they get into a fight, and the pirates are kind of made up of a weird group. There's basically everyone's a different race, different alien race. One is a Romulan, then the others are, just ones that I don't know.
Yeah.
But the leader is played by Richard Lynch. I mentioned it being excited about seeing his name in the credits last time. He is a very prominent character in God Told Me To, but he pops up in a lot of Mystery Science Theater level movies. And
by complete coincidence, I ended up recommending God Told Me To someone at work the other day.
Why wouldn't you recommend it to everyone?
Like for whatever reason, we were talking about random movies that are terrible but worth watching that happen to be on YouTube. I'm pretty sure that was on YouTube, because it was at one point.
It was at one point, although I take umbrage with terrible but good, because I don't think it is terrible. I think it's genuinely actually quite good.
Do you really?
Oh yeah, if you watch it again, it's actually kind of... It's wild, ballsy. It knows what it's doing. It's not... Seriously, I've seen the movie like 3 or 4 times, and that movie... there's a genius behind the madness. I'm not going to say it's David Lynch-esque, but it's like there's an artist behind it who knows what he's doing, right?
I had no qualms whatsoever in recommending people watch it. I'm like, no, this is worth your time, absolutely, at least once, right?
Yes. Yeah. The last time I watched that, I straight up gave it an 8, and I didn't even hesitate.
Wow. Okay. Maybe I need to revisit it.
Rewatch it.
Because I think the first time, I've only watched the ones, and I think that first time it's just
it's a roller coaster.
What the hell, right?
You're like, what the hell's going on? But it never loses its charm. Like all the weird left turns it takes, you're like, you know what? I admire this. I admire the dedication to everything. I like the director actually. He's done a lot of he did Q the Winged Serpent. Larry Cohen is the director.
Okay.
Did a lot of movies around then. No, I don't think he's got any relation to the Coen brothers, for the record. Just a similar name. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, Riker actually in this firefight with the pirates, he goes down and gets kidnapped, and he's taken aboard their ship. That's the big plot point here, and they basically put like almost a Suicide Squad type chip on the side of his neck, where the captain, played by Richard Lynch, whose name is, just for the record, Baran. Yeah, that's how I pronounced it, wasn't it? It wasn't Baron. It was Baran.
No, it was Baran. Yeah.
I'll probably just say Lynch, if I'm honest.
Just the captain.
But he, he demonstrates that he can hurt him with this, and it kind of like sends a pain through his neck, and he's like, tell us, why were you there? Why are Starfleet snooping around? Blah 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 blah, kind of thing. And then you hear the voice like, I know this man, and of course it's Picard in like rogue pirate like clothes, and he gets up and he's like, yeah, I've heard of this Riker. He's a really good Starfleet officer, but I've heard that he's also been reprimanded many times, and so like just does a little tapestry of like, okay, he is Starfleet obviously because he's wearing the uniform, but he's setting up that maybe he doesn't like Starfleet that much. Maybe he's disgruntled.
Maybe we can turn him.
Yeah.
In the same way that clearly he's playing a part where he's joined them.
Yeah,
I mean, okay, maybe he's setting something up here. At
least that's your immediate, like, that's the obvious assumption. Obviously, there's always the possibility, because it's Star Trek, that he actually believes some of this shit, and then maybe there's like something that's caused that later. But obviously, as soon as Riker and Picard are in a room alone together, he's like, "Oh, I'm glad to see you, Will," and he starts explaining everything, and he was investigating why they were stealing these artifacts, and he looked into it.
Like,
and
2/3 into this episode before we get to this stuff with Picard, I think.
Yeah, he's missing for a good... So even though I never believed he was dead, it did feel kind of nice to actually have him just be gone for a good while.
It got far enough that, especially, with the acknowledgement that I remembered it was a two-parter, where it got far enough that I was like, is Picard going to be gone the whole time, and the next episode's going to show like his side of things?
Oh, yeah.
And like that's... It was just long enough that I thought that might be where it was going. It didn't. I kind of would have liked to see that, but also this wasn't, necessarily a bad choice.
Yeah. Alternatively, I was maybe thinking they might save it for the... I mean, I wasn't thinking this at the time because I didn't realize it was a two-parter, but in hindsight, you might have been thinking that, oh, it's going to end
That's
with
the ending
him.
reveal. Yeah,
it's him, you hearing his voice and him standing up and like, oh, to be continued. Obviously, they've got a bit more... before we get to the end here.
It was a good like half hour into the episode though.
It was a good chunk. It was a good 2/3 or so, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it sets up that, he's like, hey, we have to hate each other because, maybe the captain will, because the captain doesn't like Picard, so it's like, hey, maybe if we show each other that we hate each other and he punches him in front of the captain, maybe he'll start to befriend Riker, or at least trust his opinion a bit more. And that kind of comes into play a little bit. They're on their way to a space station, which Data figures out with the crew because they're still investigating things. And Data's like, oh, we have to go to that space station and try and get there quick enough to intervene. And he's like, hey, radio the station, tell them to stall this ship if it shows up so we can get there and defend them. And likewise, Riker and Picard are kind of like suggesting things that are non-lethal. Like, hey, what if Riker uses his Starfleet credentials to like lower the shields so that they can get in and just beam the thing off without killing anyone, and it'll be less dangerous for everyone. So they set up all this stuff, and this is kind of what it's all bubbling up to. I think the biggest thing to mention before we get to how that all plays out is there's a scene, and the reason why they've kept Picard on is because Picard knows how to study and analyze the artifacts in a way that they can't, and he can really do that because it's his hobby, basically. We know that.
He likes archaeology. This has been established since like season 2, maybe.
Something like that,
it was a long time ago, to be fair.
But he's doing this, but there's a scene where the Romulan lady comes in and starts talking to, and clearly she probably doesn't like the captain too much, and she's kind of prodding around to see how Picard feels about the captain, and Picard's playing his part and showing that, he's an imbecile and he's not a real captain because he has to use these things, but he needs me because I can do this. But it does kind of sound like she's wanting to provoke him into like saying he wants to mutiny, and is kind of excited when it sounds like he might want to. It never goes too far. Obviously, it's setting up stuff for part 2, but it definitely felt like an important little bit of building for next episode.
It did, and we got the stuff when the captain was first introduced, and he talks about how he kind of mutinied and took over the role because the old canon wasn't willing enough to use these Suicide Squad devices on him. He was a bit soft, and he's clearly not. And he does rule entirely through fear. There is no respect of the crew. He does take some of their stuff under advisement. We see the Romulan lady. She like, hey, maybe we should try this stuff with with Riker and getting him listening to his credentials, because we had one little fight with Starfleet and we lost a crew member, and we can't really afford that. And he kind of goes along with it, at least.
Yeah, they lost their red shirt. Starfleet lost their red shirt. In fact, I was kind of laughing at how quickly because it was like Riker, Geordi, and Worf, and then one other dude, and then within seconds that other dude went down, and I went, "Yep, that sounds
That's
about
a red
right."
shirt. Yep.
Yes, they might not actually wear red anymore, but they're definitely still red shirts.
Yeah, and Starfleet have a lot more red shirts than this random crew do.
Yes, they got the numbers.
That's the important part for them. And so, like I say, he's willing to listen to sense to a point, but it does feel like he's ruling through fear and not through respect.
Yeah, and the whole thing bubbles up to the Enterprise shows up and they tell Riker to okay, answer them, Riker, and tell them to stand down and lower their shields or whatever. And he does tell him to stand down. He gives a direct order, looks him right in the eye. Notably, this is a close shot on him, so they don't see Picard in the back, because I was wondering if they're going to see Picard in this moment and see that he's alive. They haven't yet. But Riker afterwards says, hey, I can use my codes to lower their shields, and he goes to do it. And when we cut back to the Enterprise, they can see that he's doing that, but they say, hey, he would know that as soon as he got kidnapped, that those codes all changed for exactly this type of thing, because they know that if an officer's taken under duress, it might lead to those codes being divulged in some way, and so on and so on. And Riker knows that's the protocol, but he's doing it anyway. So Data's like, no, we're going to play along. He's clearly got a plan here, and he tells Worf to lower the shields, which Worf is not happy about.
I mean, he's a security officer. This is kind of his job to protest this. But yeah, I mean, it's a bold call from Data to be like, hey, let's assume Riker has a plan, because it's a big risk to assume he does have a plan, and it isn't just genuinely under duress. Yeah,
and Picard, is told to hit them with something, and he does. He blasts the engine at the back with something, a beam, and that's
it seems like a very tactical shot to me, right? Like, hey, let's they can't run, but let's not do too much damage.
That is probably the case, but that's where it pauses and says to be continued. So, it's still showing us that he is at least hitting the ship. He's not somehow thought a way around that. So there's still a gaining trust with the bad guys kind of element to this ending. So
you can see his argument when they're like, why didn't you destroy them? He'll be like, well, we've disabled them. They can't follow us. We're safe, right? There's a logic he can just argue his way through.
He'll think on his feet, because he does it earlier in the episode when he said he seems to know a lot about the defenses of this space station, and wait, how do you know all this? And he's like, oh, because I tried to smuggle something out of there 2 years ago, and he sort of very, very quickly and convincingly gives them a reason for it, but it does kind of feel like it's all bubbling up to eventually the captain getting pissed off that he keeps being dangled with all these ideas from everyone, and we'll see where we are by that point. It's a pretty decent cliffhanger and a place to leave off on. I also do think it's interesting, we kind of glossed over this earlier, but Riker's actually got orders to take this ship somewhere else, and he calls an admiral and is like, hey, I need to request that we look into Picard's death. I want to investigate it. Could we not do this other stupid thing you've told us to do? And the admiral's like, is that a good idea? And he's like maybe, I'm not going to lie and say that I'm not impartial to this, because, clearly...
But maybe the crew needs this.
Yeah, but we're all determined, and I'm determined, and we have to find answers. And the Admiral's actually quite understanding and just says, okay, consider yourself, your orders at your discretion. And I'm like, I feel that's like a blank check. He's just giving him a blank check to go and investigate what he wants.
I think it shows a lot of how much, not just this Admiral, but Starfleet in general, does respect Picard as a captain, being like, hey, they know the amount of loyalty his crew has, clearly, and they're like, do you know what? Let's give him this one. Let him take a few days, chase down a few leads. They're just assuming it'll be dead ends, probably, and that nothing major will really happen, and then they'll come back to work. Everything will be better. This is, instead of doing the funeral thing and all the stuff that Troy wanted, the Admiral's like, yeah, this is more Starfleet. Let's do this. Let them get out of the system this way.
Yeah, of course they're actually going to find Picard alive, so things will.
But I mean, even Riker's not expecting that. No one's expecting that.
No.
When they go on this mission, so I do appreciate that from the Admiral's point of view, he's like, yeah, let him just go off on a wild goose chase for a few days, chase down a few leads, no harm done. Clearly, whatever mission they were meant to be on wasn't immediately pressing. There was no real time crunch. It's okay, I can wait a few days.
Yeah. I think it's smart that they reveal Picard's voice before you see him, so you can recognize the voice and let your mind race a little bit for a few seconds before he stands up.
I think, not that we wouldn't recognize Picard's voice at this point, no matter what, like you do with basically any main character on the show. I think it does have an extra layer of help that, Patrick Stewart has a very distinctive, strong voice.
Oh, he does, yeah.
So this works like just a little bit more than, like, say this was like I don't know, even someone like Worf. Like, obviously we'd all recognize his voice if he did it off screen, but Michael Dorn does not have as strong and distinctive a voice as Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, I think, the episode's called Gambit, and it does kind of feel like it ends on a gambit. Like, whatever he's doing here, whatever play this is to try and win the day and win the fight, like, we don't know exactly what the plan is from here, or how they're going to try and bluff their way around this now, but the mere fact that Riker did try and input those codes knowing that they'd recognize that he's doing it and they wouldn't work, does suggest there is some kind of game plan that he's hoping to, like, pay off in part 2. So yeah. We'll see where that goes and what we do with that. But I think it's probably safe to say this is probably the best episode of the season so far, because they've been kind of mediocre so far this season.
They have, and while I do think this is a really strong part 1, I am a little bit concerned that part 2 might not just hold up that momentum, because as much as I think this was really well paced, it had a lot of revealed Picard like a really strong time, like late enough into the episode that it really worked, and it has this little bit of mystery. I don't know if there's it feels like there's maybe 20 minutes of good plot left to go with a 40-minute episode, and I'm a little concerned it might feel stretched out.
Well, I mean, it's a bit presumptuous. I have no idea where they're going with it, so
it is, but just that's where it feels right now to me on a gut instinct, and I could be completely wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong.
Yeah, I would say, this is a solid action episode that it has some good character moments. It's not a sci-fi idea episode. This is not one where it's making me go, oh, this is some great pondering philosophy that we're getting from Picard to here. This is not that type of episode. That's
fine.
This is a pure action and sort of tension episode with some good character beats, because it shows Riker having to be in charge and being angry, and the other, even Troy
kind of bad at being in charge, right?
Yeah, even Troy kind of like sort of blowing up at Riker. It was kind of a big moment for her as well. So, if anything, it would just be nice to see maybe more. Maybe we'll get this before they find out he's alive. I doubt it, but it'd be nice to maybe see like a moment with Geordi, a moment with Crusher, about reflecting on the fact that Picard's dead, because we kind of skip over them in this episode.
The big one, right? Given that their relationship is a lot closer than pretty much everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But yeah, normally I'd read out the next episode's description, but when it comes to 2-parters, it feels a bit weird to bother. So we'll just leave it, and part 2 is coming next time. Of course, that'll be in 2 weeks' time, because next week we'll be back to Deep Space Nine for its next episode. But you can let us know what you thought of Gambit Part 1 in the comments. A like and all that stuff helps out a lot. It helps people find the show, it helps people find the channel, and helps grow everything. So please do hit the button. But of course, you can support us even more by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and that helps keep the lights on and keeps all the recording software running. So go and have a look. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you for joining us once again. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher is, I don't know, he's walking the plank off his own pirate ship, I guess. I don't know.